In this Excel video, we're going to talk about a little bit more about formulas and functions, but I'm also going to talk about absolute references and cells, which is I think a really important skill to learn when you're building spreadsheets, especially spreadsheets want to have some flexibility to them. So I think the best way to show this would be to build just kind of a multiplication table, which I know we don't necessarily need for any reason right now, but so I'm just going to build a multiplication table. 1 through 10, and 1 through 10. Probably something you haven't used or seen for quite a few years, so just to make sure we're on the same page. So effectively what I want to do is I want this box to represent 1 times 1 and this box to represent 1 times 2. So I'm just taking column times row. As you can see, if you were to go through here and just type these all out, equals B3 times equals, excuse me, B3 times A4 and equals B3 times A5 and so on, it would take quite a while to type all these. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use cell references and I'm going to use the fill handle to make this substantially faster. So my first one, I'm going to hit equals B3 times A4. Now, the issue is if I just do that and I try and fill handle this down, what it's going to do is those cells are both going to move. So this one, rather than being what this one should be, is B3 times B5, but what it is B4 times B5, and then it continues B5 times A6. So what I want to happen in this case is I want to fill handle this down. I want B3 to be B3 the whole time, because what should happen here is 1 times 1, 1 times 2, 1 times 3, 1 times 4, this one times 5, this one times 6, and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these numbers if you're not right. I'm going to go back into my formula, or you can rewrite the formula if you want. Rewrite it, so I haven't written very many. I'm going to hit equals B3. Now you can either type $signs or you can hit the F4 key. And what that'll do is it puts a $sign before the B and a $sign before the 3. And what that means is anytime there's a $sign ahead of either the column or row, it means it stays there. It doesn't move. It's an absolute reference. So now when I fill handle this down, it will always be multiplying by B3. If I hit F4 again, it only takes the 3, and that means that it would stay in the row, but not the column. So that would mean it would always stay in 3, which actually would work here too, since I'm copying down. If I hit it again, it would only stay in the row. It would only stay in row B when I copy it down. And I hit it one more time and it goes back to normal. So I'm going to hit F4 the one last time, or you can type a $sign before the B and before the 3. I'm going to multiply that times the 1. And that one I do want to move, because when I fill handle this down, I want it to be 1 times 2 times 1 times 3. So I'm going to hit enter. Now when I do this, what you'll see is that now every single one, the first reference in the function is B3 and it stays at B3. Now we can do this that way, and that's for up and down. But the problem is that either I have to write this formula each and every time across here, or I could find a different way to do the function, laterally too. So if I hit in this column, if I hit equals A1 times C2, or I'm sorry, C3, I can make, if I want to fill handle this to the right instead of up, instead of down, if I want to fill handle the row instead of the column, I can make A4 solid, absolute, by hitting F4 again. Those $signs show up. I can fill handle this over, which would also work. So you can kind of choose which way you can fill this table out, either by making absolute references to the row or the column, whichever way you want. So you can continue playing around with this if you want to. Now, how I use this, in teaching or otherwise, is I can have my students, like a grade book. So student 1, we'll make another miniature grade book here, all the way down to student 10. We have assignment 1. Now remember, to auto size, we can just double click on that button there when the mouse becomes the 2 arrows in a line. And let's say instead of this being percentages, I've got it as scores. So let's say this person scored 75 points, this person scored 68 points. I'm just making numbers up, 98, 74, 68, 96, 53, 87, 88, and 92. So let's say these are all actual points earned on the assignment, but I want to figure out what the percentage is. The first thing I need to know is, I don't have the information here, is what is it out of? How many points is the assignment out of? So let's say that the assignment had points possible of 125. So simply to find the percentage, I can just take 75 divided by 125. And notice it comes up as a decimal. This is where you want to use your format bar and go up here and find the percentage. So you can format it to a percentage, and you can increase or decrease your decimal as well if you want to. So now I've got that, but I'm gonna have to retype that formula every single time unless I use an absolute reference. What I want to stay solid is the 125. I want all of these to be divided by 125. So I'm gonna go back into my function. I'm gonna look at which one I want to stay. In this case, I want C2 to stay where it's at. So I'm gonna go to the C2 cell reference. I'm gonna hit F4, hit enter. Then I can fill handle this down and get my scores by percentage for everyone in the class. Something else, and this is just kind of a cool thing that Excel does that just I think is useful to know, is anytime you highlight a set of numbers, if I highlight this or if I highlight that, it doesn't really matter what set of numbers. And you probably can't see it on my screen, but if you're doing this with me, which I hope you are, in the bottom right-hand corner, a little bit to the left of the right-hand corner, you'll see that anything that you select or highlight, it gives you an average, a count, and a sum. So this, for example, says the average is 63.9, the count is 10, and the sum is 639.2%. And then I can do it over here too. You can see my average is 79.9, my count is 10, and my sum is 799. So that's kind of a cool feature of Excel, where if you don't want to write a formula or function, you just want to know what something adds up to or averages to or how many of them there are, you can just highlight them and it gives you all that information without actually typing any type of function in. Okay, so the other thing I was going to show in this video is how I use Excel for the date function. Now the date function in Excel is kind of interesting, and I think it's kind of cool because the dates in Excel are actually numbers. The backing of them is actually numbers, even if you put, you know, Tuesday, December, whatever it is of a given year. It'll show that in format, but the backing of it is actually a number. And why that's nice is because that means you can do math with it. Okay, if there's an underlying number, that means you can utilize, you know, addition, subtraction, anything like that. So for example, if I wanted to know if I took out, you know, a loan on 12/15 of 2018, and it was due in 90 days. If I want to know what exactly that day is, I can simply take 12/15/2018 plus 90, and it will tell me that is March 15th of 2019. So you can see how many days until something, you can see how many days between things, you can say anything like that. How I personally utilize this more frequently is I'll use this for dates in a syllabus. So if the semester, like this semester, starts on, well, technically the 19th, but we'll do it as a Monday, so we'll do the 18th. So 1/18/2021. And if I want to have in my syllabus, you know, every Monday for 7 days, I can simply take that date plus 7, because there's 7 days in a week, hit enter. And then I can handle that down to see what all the Mondays are for the entire semester, however how long you want to go through to the semester goes. Which is, like I said, a nice thing to do, or easy thing to do when you're building these types of things and using dates on a frequently. Let's see. So that's a little bit about absolute references. It's a little bit about cell references. And then I think the last thing I want to do in this is something that I would recommend is, if you want to get more comfortable in Excel, is having Excel pulled up as your calculator all the time. And one of the ways to kind of ease into using it all the time is by building something you can just pull up as your calculator. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight A2 all the way over to D2 and then go down through D15. I'm just going to come up here and make that yellow. And then I'm going to come out here, type sum, type average, And then what I'm going to do is, and I use this a lot too if I'm entering grades or want to find out the average or total of something, where I'll make this box and then I'll just write a formula here for the sum of everything that's highlighted, and write one here for the average of everything that's highlighted, and then I'll just delete the data anytime I want to use it, and keep reutilizing the same little area. So just to put some numbers in. If you see something like that, it was formatted as a date. So notice that one was already formatted as a date, so it changed it. So the number of days is the number of days since January 1st. How the numbers are represented as far as dates go is the number of days since January 1st, 1900. So I put 20 in there. It thought I meant 000020, which in date form is 120 and 1900. But if I just change that to to decimal form instead, which I'll highlight all these and make it in comma form, then it'll get rid of that. So now I've got a whole bunch of numbers. And so now I can type equals. Remember, we always have to have equals or plus first. Sum, open parenthesis. I'll highlight all of these. Then close my parenthesis. And I'm going to do the same thing with the average function, equals average, open parenthesis. Select all of the highlighted area and hit enter. Now, what's nice about this is these numbers don't mean anything, so I just put whatever random numbers in here. But what's nice about this is if you don't touch those, you don't have to rewrite those functions ever again. You can just go through and delete this and say, I want to know the total of 15, 60, 75, and 80. And you've got the sum and the average automatically done over here for you. You can do this with all kinds of functions. Sum and average are just a couple that I've shown already. But you could do this with any number of functions that you could build, which means effectively you can build a calculator for anything that you want, and it'll calculate anything you want that's within this group of cells as it is. So that'd be something else I'd recommend doing. And you can build other functions too. You can look through the functions and see if there's anything else that you think might be valuable for you to have an auto calculated field for. But we'll end this video there.